that's part of life, is just continuing to learn. And, I feel like everything with podcasting, I feel like a lot of people just can't podcast. It's like they have to make money, they have to get sponsors. And yes, that's great, but it's not, you don't need to, it's not a requirement to be a podcaster. It's okay to keep it the way you want it, as a passion project. You don't have to make money at everything.
Life gets tough, and I know it's hard to cope with the unknown. For all of us, I know it'd be easy if we were perfect, but we're not. So we go to find our faith, to find our hope. It all begins with looking up. It all begins with you. It's time to elevate. We sing it loud and proud. We make our voices known. Nothing can shut them out. Elevate. Shout it for you and me. We can do anything. It's time to set us free.
Welcome, I'm Ann Lucente, and welcome back to another episode of Time to Elevate. If you've been here with me before, you definitely heard me talk about my guest today. I met her when I was just a baby podcaster. Although she currently lives in California in the Bay Area, she got her start in life in my neck of the woods, New York, which could explain our immediate connection because you can take the girl out of New York, but you can't take New York out of the girl. She's the founder and editor-in-chief of Women Who Podcast magazine, which was born in April of 2021. Her vision is to give independent women podcasters the accolades they deserve and build a supportive community for podcasters to evolve and succeed. She also loves to cut digital film, which I'm hoping she will tell us more about, as well as ride her e-bike around town, so do I, and being in and on the water. So, if you really love what you hear on this episode today, and you're even just thinking of launching your own show, pick up the latest issue of Women Who Podcast magazine and learn all about podcasting. Women Who Podcast magazine celebrates independent women podcasters from all over the globe. It's a place where their efforts are seen, their stories are heard, and their hard work is acknowledged. Women Who Podcast magazine strives to be a forum for fans and hosts to reach out to one another for support, collaboration, and inspiration. You can find them by visiting womenwhopodcastmag.com and follow them on Instagram at Women Who Podcast Magazine. Now, without any further ado, please help me give a super excited, warm welcome to the founder and editor-in-chief of Women Who Podcast magazine, my friend and fellow New Yorker, Kathy Barron.
Hello, how are you?
I love it. I didn't think you would lose that, right?
I don't know if I even had a New York accent, because I was like in the northern part where we don't really have an accent, but then people would say, well, it sounds like you have a southern accent. And I'm like, well, I don't know how much sense that makes, but okay.
Well, I think you still got the attitude. That's all that matters. It doesn't matter
right.
how you say it. Since doing voiceover at my family and my sister especially is like, you don't sound like you're New York anymore. I said, but if I get mad, I completely sound like I am.
There's no holding back.
The Bronx comes out, So I'm so happy you're here. Oh my gosh.
Thanks for having me, Ann. This is quite the adventure and privilege. So thank you for inviting me.
See the shirt I'm wearing?
Yes, proudly. Thank you.
Love it. Love it. My Women Who Podcast shirt. And it was so funny because it wasn't just the shirt. That was not the only reason I reached out to you. But because I was like a baby podcaster and I had no idea what was happening in life, I heard your interview on 19 Stories with Cheryl Holling.
Yeah, Cheryl's great.
Oh, she's wonderful. And I loved it. I loved it. And the advice you gave and different things. I was taking all these notes. And then I remember Cheryl saying, oh my gosh, I got like a t-shirt. I go, excuse me, I want to buy a t-shirt. Can I buy a t-shirt? And that's how we actually started talking.
Right. Yeah.
But that was the beginning of a wonderful relationship because I found out more about the magazine, which we will talk about. But before we do that, I kind of want to know about you. Like, who are you? Tell me.
I have no idea.
I don't
I'm
either.
still trying to figure that out after 56 years. You'd think I'd have it figured out by now, but I just get more and more confused with each year I get older. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I have more questions than answers at this point in my life.
but at least you know the questions to ask, right? Like that, I think that's like 90% of the thing, right?
True.
Sometimes it is. I feel like that too, but I think sometimes I think it's because maybe we're just going into these new ventures, and which is a
Hmm.
good thing, right? It's like we're not getting stale, so we have no idea what's happening, but we
Right.
keep going. So
Yes.
it's not
Well,
too bad.
keeping the learning part of your life, I think, is key to what? I have no idea, but it definitely is essential, I think, just to keep curiosity and learning new things. I mean, that's kind of what the magazine brought on is that I went to art school for video production. And that's when I kind of learned a little bit of InDesign, which is the software that I use for the magazine.
Okay.
So when I decided to start the magazine, InDesign is what I'm using, and I mean, I'm still learning. Like I go on a Udemy, and I've bought a master class for InDesign, so I'm still learning as I go.
Right.
But that's part of life is just continuing to learn. And I feel like everything with podcasting, I feel like you can't a lot of people just can't podcast. It's like they have to make money, they have to get sponsors, and yes, that's great, but it's not you don't need to. It's not a requirement
Right.
to be a podcaster. It's okay to keep it the way you want it as a passion project. You don't have to make money at everything, you know.
I love that. Can I tell you I love that because we always put this pressure on ourselves, right? And then people will always not always, but you have people in your life who are not doing this. They're outside, family, friends, whatever. They're like, so, they always look at the monies and they'll say, and I'll be like, well, I wasn't thinking that right now. It's not like you wouldn't want to make money, but I like it. Like you said, I love doing this. I don't know where it came from. I don't know how it happened, but I absolutely love it.
Mhm.
And yes, of course, great if I could make money, but I also have other things like voiceover and other things that I do. And this, I just absolutely to get like in my brain, like I have to make money could totally ruin me. It could
Yeah,
totally-
right.
yes,
I mean, it shifts your perspective on things if you're
yeah,
doing it to make money, because in some ways it becomes more of a job, right? More
right.
of a chore. And I think podcasting is more than that. It's creative. You kind of need to enjoy doing it because it's a lot of work. So,
Right.
you know,
Exactly. Exactly. And I have some questions about that. But I want wait, before we move on, I want to say okay, so you were living in New York, you were born there. And
yes.
it's fine if it was north, it's okay, but you also know my area, which is good. But then when did you leave New York? When did you go out to California?
In 87.
Okay.
So I went to a
Mhm.
2-year business college in Syracuse, New York. And then I knew I didn't want to go back to Ticonderoga, which is where I grew up,
Mhm.
because it's really small and I didn't feel like there was much opportunity there. And I had
Mhm.
a brother and a sister that lived in California. So
Oh,
one lived in the
nice.
Bay Area, one lived in the Central Coast. And I picked
Mhm.
the Bay Area and yeah, started working in
Nice.
the hotels and did corporate stuff for a while. Then I got my degree in massage therapy and had my own
Wow.
massage therapy business for 7 years.
Wow.
So I've always kind of had that entrepreneurial kind of mindset. Um,
Mhm.
and then I moved away in 2001. I moved up to Portland because
Okay.
I was like, I'm over the Bay Area. I need space. It was getting too, you know, uh, cementy,
Okay.
and needed some more trees and nature. So I moved out to Portland without a job, barely a place to live. Didn't I visited there once because I was thinking, maybe I should go visit before I actually move there. I've never been to
Yes.
Portland, but let's move there anyway. Uh,
I
and
love that.
so, and so that's when I started working for Trader Joe's because I needed a job. And I was at this dive bar, and two women were playing pool, and they were both worked for Trader Joe's, and they're like, "Well, you need to go apply." So there's that story, how that story started. And then I decided that, when I was in California, I did some photography and I was doing this black and white kind of essay of the migrant farmer community in this area, which is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to Portland, I was thinking, I really need to give these people voices. Like photos just really aren't cutting it for me. And I wanted to learn video production. So let's move to Seattle and go to art school. Why not?
I love this. I love it. You only live once, right? Like get going where you want to go.
Yeah. So I moved to
Wow.
Seattle in 2005 and, transferred there with Trader Joe's, which is great because you can do that. And graduated from art school like a year and a half, 2 years later. And yeah.
Wow.
So
And so this is where the digital film, cutting digital film and things came from that at that
yeah,
point.
like
You were
video
doing
editing and,
right.
documentaries was my
Nice.
thing. So while I was at art school, that's kind of what I focused on. And that was my portfolio.
Oh,
And,
that's
I
great.
really loved interviewing people. A production company that I worked for after school, after I graduated, was doing a documentary on Pike Place Market. So I was able to be involved with that project. And that was just really cool to hear their stories because it's like generations have, with all the the artists and the buskers at Pike Place and just the businesses that are there. It's like generations and generations. Like people are born in Pike Place Market and they grow up in the market. So just being able to hear their stories and how
Wow.
it's haunted and there's ghosts and
Really? I've heard of it, but I don't know a lot about it, but I have heard of it. That's really there's ghosts. That's interesting. Just like the previous of families
yeah, yeah,
past and
yeah,
very cool. Very
yeah.
cool. I like that. That's and so do you do any more of that any more documentaries or anything? Well, kind of podcasting could that I can see why you transitioned maybe into
Well,
different
my
things
dad
with
was
that.
in radio and TV.
Okay.
He did the news, and he did ads and stuff. He had that voice, that radio voice. And but I do video editing. I would like to do the documentary that I had in mind back in the day of doing a documentary on migrant farm workers. So,
Oh.
that's been something that I've always wanted to do. So
Mhm.
maybe the
Yeah.
next couple of years I can create that. Um,
Mhm. That would
so
be good.
that's
That would
definitely on my list for doing. Yeah.
yeah. I love that. And I love that, as we get older, like I feel the same way. Like I have so much to do. Like I have so much to do. I have friends that are like, oh well, I would have. It's over. I'm like, oh my god, like
Yeah.
it's not over. It's never over.
Yes, exactly.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. So I wanted to just touch on podcasting for a moment. not
Yeah,
just touch,
absolutely.
not just touch on it, but I remember not that long ago, I feel like not that long ago, I remember going, "What the heck is a podcast? Like, where did it come from? Like, what does that mean?" Like, it's so funny. And here I am doing a podcast, but I still remember thinking, what exactly is that? So before we talk about the magazine, I just wanted to talk about I know I heard your final episode of your podcast, which was awesome. Um,
Thank you.
but you had been doing it for how long? It was
6 years. Yeah.
6 years, and
Yeah.
it's called I love the name, Women Who Sarcast. That has to be a New York thing, come on, admit it. And so, I love what I heard so far. I heard a few of them, and I'm like, "I love this," and I get why the transition and everything, which you can tell me about, but, just tell me about it, like, I laughed out loud at the one I heard, what was it? Oh, it was the cut to the chase one.
Mhm.
Menopause Mayhem. Oh
Mhm.
my god, I was laughing. I was with Corey, is it
Yeah.
Asuncion? Is
Yeah,
that her last name?
Corey's amazing. She's a lot of fun, and she's got the same humor, the same, like, straight, no chuckle, no laughter, sarcasm, and
Yes.
she's lived a lot in her short life, so she has a lot of fodder to add to the episodes that I don't because I'm not a mom. I think she has, like, 6 or 7 kids and so she's got a lot of stories to tell. But yeah, I mean, we're both kind of going through it. So
But you connect your energy together was this. You were just hysterical. I was driving, listening, and I just couldn't stop laughing. And so I was like, "This is great." So tell me, how did it come about starting that podcast?
Well, in 2017, I think 2018. What's 6 years minus divided by 3? Take away the 4.
I
I
love that.
was talking to someone that I knew in Santa Fe because I lived in Santa Fe for like 4 years after the Pacific Northwest stint, um, and I was back in California, and we were just chatting, and she's very sarcastic as well, and we would just on the phone, just back and forth, just laughing from the time we start talking to the time we hang up.
Mhm.
And I'm like, you know what? We should really start a podcast together. And so that's basically how it started. It was just like something I threw out there and it came to fruition. Unfortunately, after a few months, she had to stop
Okay.
podcasting just because of life stuff.
Mhm.
And so I was just like, okay, now what do I do? So then my friend Mario, he's a comedian. He kind of stood in as the token woman and for about 6 months. And so that was fun. And then it was like, okay, how do I reformat this? And that's where I went to each episode is different. So the first episode of the month was with a guest, and then it was a co-host, and then it was me doing my real deep shit, which I kind of created to kind of get me out of my comfort zone because I'm not a chatty. I can't just talk your ear off for 30 minutes. It's just not in my DNA. And so
Right.
that was just a way for me to come out of my shell. And those are like the shortest episodes that I have.
Because you were by yourself. You're like, "Okay, I'm done." But I heard, yes, I heard a few of those too, and they're great. They're great. I like the diversity of how you switched it into different things like that, and it keeps it probably fresh and stuff along the way.
And I was doing them every week, like
Yeah, I heard
week
you
to
say
week
that.
to
I could not
week.
believe it. That
Yeah.
I don't know how that's possible, but yes, that's amazing.
Yeah,
That really is
it's a
amazing.
lot. And then last fall, I was like, okay, well, maybe instead of like ending the podcast, I can do seasons. Maybe
Mhm.
that'll be a little bit more manageable. And so that's when and Corey and after um, that Mario stint, and then I brought on my friend Shaylani, who was one of the episodes, and she's great. And we really, had a great rapport with each other. And then and then Corey came in after Shaylani left. And then with the seasons, as you probably know, interviewing guests takes a lot of work because you got to
Mhm.
contact them. You got to, the back and forth with the emails and scheduling. And
Right.
so it takes a lot of work. You don't just show
Mhm.
up and record and you're done.
Right.
And
Right.
so I thought, well, maybe I won't do the guests. I'll just do the co-hosts, and that's what I did this last season is I had Chelsea as one of the episodes and then Corey. And then I just got to the point where it was like, okay, my brain is fried. I'm
Yeah.
tired of trying to come up with topics to talk about. But
Mhm.
it's funny you should bring that up because I was driving home from my mom lives about 5 hours south from here. My dad and my mom moved out here in 88. And so they sold the house, sold all of my belongings without even giving me a chance to come out there before they sold the house. And so my
Oh,
mom
no.
shows up with this
Oh,
one
no.
cardboard box with
Oh,
everything that I owned. And I'm like, this is it.
that's all you need.
Yeah.
That's it.
So I was
Oh,
like,
no.
okay.
Oh,
Not
no.
traumatized by that at all.
No.
And
Oh, my
and so I
goodness.
was visiting. She just turned 90 last November. So I go down with her for her doctor's appointments because she's proven that she can't either tell us everything or,
Oh,
on purpose leaves things out. So I'm like,
yes.
okay, well, guess what? I'm going to your doctor's appointments with you, whether you like it or not.
That's right. You have earned me now. I'm
Yes.
coming.
You've done this to yourself.
That's right. Nobody to blame but yourself.
Right, exactly. And as I was driving back and stuck in, bumper to bumper traffic, I came up with the idea of maybe like still doing the podcast and just doing like series.
Mhm.
So that's kind of marinating in my brain.
Cool.
So it might not be totally done. So
Yeah.
we'll see what
I
happens.
I would love that because I told you I just started really listening to this because I was like, oh, you know what? I know it. There's so many I want to listen. You know how that is, right? There's so many podcasts that I have on my listen list, and then I'm like, okay, and I like to listen more. I'll listen while I'm here if I'm doing something that doesn't take my full crazy attention. But I like in the car, or
Hmm.
like whatever. I feel like I'm not in the car often enough, but then I'll play it around the house while I'm doing stuff. But I love it, and I'm like, "Wait, I have to listen to some of these." I was, like, laughing so hard, really, and,
I appreciate
that
that.
it really, really was. I was, like, really laughing out loud. So, even now these episodes, I'm hoping will stay there even though you did your last. You're gonna leave them
Yeah.
available for all of us forever the rest. Okay, good.
Yeah. Yeah. Forever and ever
Forever and ever, because it will take me a while to go through
until
them.
I
Yeah,
stop
it
paying
was
the bill. Yes.
Yes, that's it. Oh, well, that's good. I'm glad I brought it up because maybe it spark you to do whatever else, you're thinking for that. But, um, so I wanna talk about the magazine, Women Who Podcast magazine, which it's 3rd year,
I
right?
know. It's crazy to think that
Yeah.
it's been 3 already. It's like, where does the time go?
Wow, just 3
Yeah.
years. It's crazy how that really does, And, I have to say part of part of this is so crazy, I kid you not. When I was that little baby podcaster, which was not that long ago, I would think it was about 3 months when I met you. And then I knew, and you actually highlighted Time to Elevate. I got
Mhm.
highlighted.
I
I'm
know how
super
you
excited. Yes.
I know how you, like, accentuated that highlighting, not featured, but highlighted.
Not featured, don't confuse it, but my motivation was we can ask to be featured, and when it's a year, I could ask. It's like, and at the time I had a co-host, and she was with me for about 9 months, and then, so now I'm solo, and so, my motivation was, I'm gonna make that year because
That's right. I'm gonna keep doing this one, get in that
keep
magazine.
doing it, and that's it. But I so appreciate, seriously, like, just your support, just like always saying, what can I do to help? And the platform for the magazine and all of that is just like it makes it, it's easy to ask questions, which is really important because there's so much
Mhm.
out there.
Mhm.
But so tell me how the magazine got started. Like what made you start that?
Well, in 2020, I went to Podfest Expo in Florida. It was my first podcast conference that I attended, and it was cool. It was great. It was very inspirational. It was I came home totally stoked and excited. And at the conference, there was this magazine being distributed as a new podcasting magazine. And I was like, "Oh, well, this is pretty interesting." So I just like, "Okay, well, we'll see if they represent us independent women podcasters."
Mhm.
So I gave it until like October. And then I was just like, yeah, it's just not cutting it because, Katie Couric's on the cover. All these celebrities are being
Right.
represented. And it's just like, no, that's not what podcasting is at its
Mhm.
grassroots, like at its core.
Right. Right.
It's the little people like us
Mhm.
that
Right.
make the podcast community.
Yeah.
We only see like the celebrities and the big wigs that have like a whole
Mhm.
team behind them, you know,
Right.
that have the budget, that have, like I said, the team and the
Mhm.
resources to be out there. Um, and so I was like, okay, well, you get that little creative voice in your head, as you probably have experienced. And that little voice came in and said, well, you're going to have to create the magazine yourself.
You're like, "No, I'm
And
not
I'm
doing
just
that right
like,
now."
are you crazy? Who is
I
that?
did I heard you say that in something I was listening to along the way with you, where you said you get that and I know what you're talking about. It's like a gut and a head. All of a sudden, that idea pops in, you feel it in your gut, and you're like, "Oh, no. Oh, no, no. I can't believe I have to do this."
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
yes.
Then I'm thinking, okay, let's think about this before you get totally. And so I emailed my friend Sandy Larry's, who's the host of the Good Girl Confessional podcast. And she just started, like the year before, a magazine called Women Beyond 40.
Oh.
And so she was creating this whole like empire about women beyond 40. and she's in Australia, and we kind of did a Zoom call, and I was telling her what was going on, and she's like, "Yeah, you need to do this magazine." And I'm like, "Damn it,
Uh,
Sandy. That's
I
not
wanted
the
you to
that's
talk me
not
out of
the
it.
answer I was expecting or wanted." So she was on our first issue. She was the cover of our first issue.
Oh, great.
Um, because she really was that catalyst for me to take that leap and to do it. And,
Mhm.
like I said before, I had no idea what I was doing. I've never published a magazine. Um, so I was going in pretty blind with it.
Wow.
Um,
Mhm.
and as a creative, sometimes you're caught up in that right and wrong. I got to do it right. What's the right way?
Mhm.
And, I just realized that I just need to do it how I want to do it and forget everybody else. So,
Yeah. Wow, and now it's the 3rd year. I
yeah.
can't even believe it. And it's true, you wanna, you try to do it the right way, but I remember hearing people well, you wanna do it the right way, but you try to know everything.
Mhm.
But I remember hearing, "Just get started." Like, "Just get started and don't obsess." Like, I was obsessed about my sound, I was obsessed about my stuff, and then doing voiceover, of course, I'm listening to every little thing, and I'm like, "Oh, there's a plosive," but, I mean, this is,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
ridiculous. You have
Exactly.
to, stop. Don't over edit, don't take if things are I don't take I love the real things, like the real, it's funny, the real crazy stuff that happens in these podcasts. But I don't know because behind the scenes of podcasters and stuff, if you're not in it at all and you have no idea about anything, sound, editing, or any of that, you think, "What's the big deal?" I remember friends saying, "What's the big deal? Set up your phone, record something," and I'm like, "Oh my god, stop talking to me. Leave me
Well,
alone."
you do it then
Yeah,
if it's so
you
easy.
That's right. That's right, and I'm like, "You've gotta be kidding me." Oh my god. Um, so I wanted to, also talk about because I've heard this phrase with you say about there's stumbling blocks. We're going to admit, as much as we love it in everything in life, there's a
Mhm.
stumbling block, no matter what it is. There's always challenges of learning or whatever, or I'm tired, or we only
Mhm.
have so much energy. Like I love doing this, but I want to go to bed.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
so, and I heard you talk about pod fade, and I have to tell you that was so helpful because that was right at the beginning that I heard that.
Mm.
And I thought, because when you feel like that, you realize, all right, it's all right to feel like that. Like you think you're not supposed to feel anything. You're
Yeah.
supposed to always be up and supposed to always be, I listened to the first episodes and I think I was on a high. My God. I had no idea what was coming, but but
Right.
learning it.
Until it hits you, and then you're like, "What the hell just happened?"
I
Yeah.
know, I know. And I mean, I'm so thankful that I enjoy doing this. I enjoy doing the editing and all of that. But, are there ways to like get through pod fade that you can think of?
Well, I think if you're just starting out, I think knowing that that's a thing
Mhm.
is a good first step, because then you'll know what the signs are if you
Right.
start feeling that burnout, that overwhelm. But I also feel that if you prepare for it, I mean, they always say, like, you know, record in batches, like have a
Yes.
few episodes in the can so that,
Mhm.
you can keep that going and you're not going week to week to week. And sometimes
Right.
that's practical and sometimes it's not. Like if you're a solo
Mm.
podcast and you're the only one that's recording, that
Right.
seems realistic. If you're interviewing people,
Mhm.
that might not be so realistic. So you have to
Right.
do what basically you have to do what feels right for you and how you want your podcast to be. Don't worry
Right.
about what, you know, the podcaster next to you is doing, as hard as it is to compare yourself to what they seem to be doing.
Right.
It doesn't have to be every week. It can be once a month, it could be twice a month, and then you can change it. That's the great thing
Right.
about podcasting is you can always pivot and shift and adapt
Yes.
because it's your
Yes.
show and you can do
Mhm.
whatever you want. So,
Right.
if you're been in it for a couple of years, maybe if you're going week to week, maybe change to seasons. I think taking a break
Mhm.
like every few months for a couple of weeks, you're not going to lose listeners. You're not going to damage your podcast. You can always I'm sure you've done this. You can always rerun or have like an encore episode. It was
Right.
of one that was previously, maybe it didn't have as many downloads as your others, so replay it at a different time.
Mm-hmm.
There's always ways, there's many ways to reuse your content so that you don't have to like reinvent the wheel all the time.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's true. And I like the because we're on Riverside now, we get the getting the video because I like to do clips, like
Mm-hmm.
just little clips of, showing. And that's basically more not on, say, Spotify or any of those, but obviously on like social media and stuff. So it kind of keeps you out there and going, and then they get attention because they're funny a lot of the times, or they're just interesting or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Not to worry. I'll be very
I was
discreet.
going to say, I don't know. Don't catch me drinking.
Oh gosh. Um, so I wanted to ask you about when you do feature people or choose to whoever you have in there, either highlighted or featured or whatever. Is there like a criteria that you have? Are there things that would have somebody stand out that you would want to have them in the magazine? What do you have as that?
I think for right now, we're focused on women identified
Mm-hmm.
podcasters. I mean, eventually, it's basically just me and a few writers that are doing it right now. So, I don't have a huge staff doing
Mm-hmm.
this magazine. It's kind of like a podcast, we're kind of doing it. We're flying the plane as we're building it, kind of thing.
Yes, yes, which is not a bad thing.
No. So eventually I'd like to maybe, invite non-binary people to join the magazine. But right now we're focused on women identified. You kind of have to be podcasting for at least a year, because I feel like if you've made it that far, then you're in it
Mm-hmm.
for, long term. Also,
Right,
after a year, you kind of have more of an idea of what you're doing, why you're doing it, your
right.
process. And so the questions that we ask are, you'll be able to answer them
Mm-hmm.
um, in a way that makes sense. And, by then you should have some stories to tell and your background and that sort of thing. Because, we are writing an
Right.
article about you and your podcast. So we kind of need that
Mm-hmm.
content to write the article. And we actually talk to the people, like we actually interview the podcasters in person or Zoom.
Right. Nice.
We
Yeah,
don't
that's
send you an
great.
email with 20 questions and say answer these questions. To me, that's
Yeah,
very impersonal. It doesn't catch the essence and the personality of the person.
that's true.
And
I agree.
that's part of writing the article too,
Mm-hmm.
is, just having a conversation with someone. um,
Right.
it kind of gives
Right.
you that different level
Mm-hmm.
than if there were just words. And also, as far as the podcast itself, I don't have any strict criteria, but it is helpful if they are inspirational in a way, or they are making a difference, or they are sharing their
Mm-hmm.
story. Um,
Right.
Every podcaster is legitimate. Everyone deserves those accolades.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in the form, as you know, it's like you have to tell me why you want to be featured. So
Right. Right. Right.
if it's just because you want to be in a magazine, you
Right.
got to tell me a little
That
bit more. So
Right. Just because I want I think it's wonderful. Of course, when I was 3 months old, I didn't think it was, but I think it's wonderful that you wait the year. It makes sense to me now. Of course, when you're there, I'm like, "Oh,
I know
all
you were
right.
like reaming me with
Come
that highlight.
on." I was like, "Come on. It's a highlight." I didn't wanna well, I really actually, when I said that, I didn't wanna overstep and be that we're
Yeah,
featured
sure.
because
You
I
were
didn't
giving
wanna
me your attitude with that
No,
highlight.
it was my New York nice attitude. You could just couldn't tell. I'm I'm like, I don't want to step on toes. We're not featured yet, but that's coming. So funny. So in the in I guess you kind of talked about it already, but I'm going to say like the question is to co-host or not to co-host. That's the question. Like I know that there's a lot of challenges along the way with either like being on your own or maybe having a co-host. Or do you think are there any choices that would make more sense, or it just depends on who you are and what's happening kind of thing?
I think it depends on the person because some people can hold their own and they're fine doing it solo. And some people are like, if I didn't have a co host, there was no way I'd be doing this. Because it's always
Right.
nice to have um, somebody else to help you with the editing and the promoting and the
Mhm.
scheduling and, that sort of thing.
Right.
So,
And the conversation, having the conversation,
yeah.
that way. Although you get that with guests too. So if you're doing it, but there are people who just do solo by themselves, no guest, and,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
you were doing that, which, like you said, is not as easy. Or maybe it's just not. I think mine would not be as long. Like
Mhm.
I'd be like, okay,
I think it depends
that's all
on,
I got.
your personality and
Yeah.
if you can hold an audience with what you have to say. Um,
Right.
but I
Yeah.
also feel as far as co-hosting, it's good. There's good and bad. There's pros and cons.
Right.
If the co-host should decide they don't want to do it anymore, then
Right.
what? Are you going to keep doing it yourself? Are you going to find another co-host?
Mm-hmm.
How is
Yeah.
that going to affect your podcast?
Right, and I think I found that I'm somewhat of a control freak,
Really?
seriously, I think we all are, seriously, otherwise we probably would not be doing this, but I always, and I think in life I do this though, not only just in podcasting, I have to know everything, even if I'm not doing it, because of that reason. What if this person walks away and I'm like, "Oh, now I can't do it." I hate to be in that position, you know? But I always did have the dream of having guests.
Mhm.
And I'm thankful that I started with a co-host and we did it the way we did it, because I don't think I would have, or it would have taken me a lot longer to get started, I think. So it almost organically
Mhm.
fell into place, which was so awesome. So it was really nice for that to happen. But I guess it's a choice.
Yeah, and I also feel like, some co-hosts leave on a bad note, and so,
Right.
there's that,
Right.
dynamic also.
Which is
It's
not
never fun.
easy.
No.
No, it's never fun. But that's an episode for another day. Yeah. I think you should talk about do one more. Do one more real deep shit. And then talk about
I did do an
Oh.
article of how to break up with your co-host. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
It's in one of the
Mhm. One of the
it's in
issues.
one of the issues?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll have to find that one. It's interesting because it's nice to read all the different things. And like I said, I love the resources, and I get something from each article, even each featured person there, even if I'm not totally like them, or
Mhm.
my podcast is totally, there's always something that they say that's just resonates with me, which is great. Um, so I do want to ask, this next topic is a bear for me, about marketing and getting out there. And I did see a post. I'm going to read it. I saw one of your posts. I think it was recent. I'm not sure. It was called on the Bust a Myth
Oh, yeah, yeah.
post.
Mhm.
Okay, so the myth is your work is done once an episode is published. And of course, busted. Promoting your podcast is key in creating an audience. So engage with your listeners.
Yeah.
So that's the point I feel where I'm at this point. I feel like, okay, I got the tech stuff down. I got the thing. I've got stuff happening now. Of course, that always changes down the road, but I feel my marketing end, like using hashtags, the right
Mhm.
hashtag, that kind of stuff. So can you just like share some wisdom here?
Oh boy. I don't know if I have any wisdom
I
because,
bet you do have some
we
wisdom.
all struggle with that. And social media is a full-time job. Promoting yourself is a full-time job. Like editing, recording the episode, finding a guest, that's easy compared to promoting yourself.
Yeah.
And, I think a lot of podcasters, when they first start, they're very focused and obsessed with their download numbers
Mhm.
because that's basically the only data we have to
Mhm.
really gauge our progress or process. And I've come to realize that downloads are just, they're about as great as hashtags and the algorithm. They're not a great data set to rate or gauge how well you're doing in podcasting. But that's really all we have, because we're an audio format. So we can't see our listeners. We don't know other than the download numbers if people are even listening, because we feel
Right.
like we're talking to the abyss, because we don't really
Exactly.
have that feedback, back and
Yeah.
forth. And social media kind of helps with that. But I think for the magazine, what I've realized is that when people comment on posts, don't just heart their comment. Say
Right.
thanks or, whatever. Do some
Mm-hmm.
comment so that they know they're talking to a person.
Right.
When
Yes.
when a new person follows the account, the IG account, I created this graphic on Canva. And I send them that graphic. It has my face. It says welcome or hello. And it kind of describes the magazine and has my
Oh,
name.
yeah.
And that to me, some people respond, some people just heart it and move on, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's great because you acknowledge them following you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like a conversation starter to whether they want to talk or not is fine, but at
Mm-hmm.
least you've acknowledged them. And that's the same with, like I said, with commenting on posts. You need to engage with people.
Right. Right. And as far as growing like your audience, what do you think, like, for instance, hashtags, do they work? And then what would you choose? And then, or is it word of mouth? Is it just what it,
I
I
don't
know
think
there's no one
it's
answer.
it's not just one thing,
I know. I
unfortunately.
know.
It's like it has to be a combination of things. I think guesting on other podcasts, we
Yes.
talked about recently podcast promo swaps.
Mhm.
And which is just a 30-second quick promo of your podcast on somebody else's podcast
Mhm.
episode. Um,
Yep.
Depending on which social media platform you're on, I don't think you need to be on every single one because I certainly
Mm.
don't have that time to spend.
No,
And that's
it's
the
too
thing. I
much.
think we try to do too much. And so then we're
Mhm.
like so thin that we're not focusing on one platform.
Right. Right.
So the magazine, we're only on Instagram. And I
Okay.
recently, excuse me, went on LinkedIn
Mhm.
reluctantly, but I did it anyway. And so I think you kind of have to see which platform works best for you and pick one and
Yeah.
really, really work on that one and really spend time on that one.
That's good advice because sometimes I find, and I try to do that too, and then I'm like, "Should I put it on that?" Like, this is me, right? So I'm like, "Okay, wait a minute." So I have Instagram, that's basically, but then I'm like, "Oh, then I'm gonna post here, and then should I post it?" And then I just can't even take it anymore, and I and I will do, like, the same one on each because it's like a commercial, so
Hmm.
you can do that, but still, I feel like, "Oh my lord," and you don't want it to be completely overwhelming. Yes, it's work, yes, there are things that we do that sometimes we're like, "All right, I need to take a break for a minute," but then it's when it's overwhelming and confusing, whole different story.
Hmm.
That's a whole different story. Too much is okay, confusing, not okay. That's like the worst.
But one thing that I've done with the magazine is I follow like women in podcasting hashtag. And
Yeah.
so I'll go to that hashtag and I'll look at the posts. So there are other people that are using the same hashtag for their posts. And so
Okay,
I'll look through
okay.
the posts, and if I see things that I like or want to like acknowledge, I'll like it or I'll make a comment. So then
Mhm.
they see you.
Oh, I like that,
So if
yes.
you're like hashtag true crime or something, whatever,
Mhm. Right.
go to that hashtag and see what other posts are there. And then you
Oh,
can
that's good.
engage with people there that you wouldn't normally engage with. And maybe they'll
Mhm.
find you, because I think people that aren't in podcasting follow those hashtags that they're interested in, like true crime or mental health or menopause,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
And then they'll find, it's a possibility they could find you. And maybe spend
Mhm.
5 or 10 minutes in the morning and 5 or 10 minutes in the afternoon doing
Mhm.
that, engaging with people on social media.
I like that. See, I never thought. See, you do have things to tell us. I like that. That's a great idea because that's another thing that I always look at. I'm always like, and I want to like make like a list. Okay, this is my core hashtags. So I have to think about it every time I do it. But then,
Hmm.
of course, there are different ones depending on what you're talking about. You're going to add that in and do whatever, But I also wanted to ask you more about the Women Who Podcast, the site itself. Like you offer workshops sometimes or different thing. What do you offer, and is it open to everyone? Whatever you have on there, because I know you have a guest sometimes, right? That come and share some things or teach some things. And
So we have the website, and we
Mhm.
have featured articles of each issue on the website. So with each issue, there's on the magazine page, that's where like the current issue information is. And then we also have like a blog page with all the other previous featured um, articles. There's also a
Mhm.
list of featured podcasters and that sort of thing. Now, currently, we have a monthly learning community. But right now, I'm just inviting the featured podcasters and the writers, the contributing writers into that space right now. I'm not quite ready to open it up to everybody because I
Mhm.
really feel like it's important to have people that are going to attend and engage and participate.
Mhm.
And we do have workshops where the people that are in the group teach each other basically. Like we had a class on Descript and then on interviewing skills and then research skills. And, so we're all helping each other, gain these skills um, that we look for to learn.
Mhm.
Um, So, and it's free to the it's at no cost because my mission for this whole thing is low barrier because I think it's important for women podcasters to get the resources.
Mhm.
And, I have a day job, so that kind of helps pay for the passion projects that I do. So, I know that there are other groups out there that do charge a monthly subscription, which I'm totally not dissing at all. It's like if that's what they're doing, that's what they're doing.
Right.
Um, and I think that's why I haven't really opened it up to everybody yet because I feel because it is free, um,
Mhm.
I don't want to have to start charging for it. So I think organically it'll expand in its own time.
Mhm. Yeah. I think that's great. The community is unbelievable, I think, since the very beginning of starting or even contemplating it.
Mm.
Like, literally, I remember asking Cheryl Holling. I started following her podcast, became friends with her. I just loved her everything she was doing, and then I remember asking her just a question about podcasts. And she goes, "Are you gonna do it? Are you gonna do it?" I go, I'm just thinking about it. I'm just thinking about it." And I was, like, terrified to even say, "Yes, yes, I think I'm gonna do it." But from that moment, like, everyone is so giving with information,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
it's just unbelievable. It's really wonderful. I mean, there's so many from the microphone because when I first started, I didn't do it from here. I did it in person with my co-host. So we were in an open room, and now I'm
Mm.
like, "How do I do that?" And it was just from that point of how to set that up and everything. So the community is just wonderful. So I love that you have that community there. It's so important. It really is.
And it's also a
Um,
space. We have a Mighty Network space. So it's a space where other the members, the group can communicate with each other and collaborate
nice.
and seek each other out for suggestions or if somebody wants to be on somebody else's podcast. So I think
Yeah.
collaboration is really key as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. That's true. And I know being on each other's podcast is so great. It's just so great anyway. And I love the fact that you were saying like that the people who are featured get interviewed by a live person because first, even for yourself, because I've done ones where you have to answer the questions, and you can't really you can think about it, but you kind of have that same thing you say all the time. But if I'm talking to somebody, something gets sparked like, oh yeah, I forgot about
Mm-hmm.
this part of my life, that you don't even think about. So it's really that's very cool. I like that.
Yeah. And I think it is important to have that support system from the get
Yeah.
go because, we're already feeling like we're alone out here
Mhm.
already. And, if you have that support to keep you going, because there are going to be those days where you're just like, I don't want to do this.
Mhm. Right.
And then
Right.
having someone to go and talk to and kind of process that what's going on with you helps get
Right.
over those little speed bumps. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So I do want to ask my signature question. I have a signature question. If you've listened before, you're probably prepared. But and you kind of talked about a lot of this anyway. But is there a moment in your life? It could be career, or it could be personal, or whatever you want to share, where you had like a moment of resilience or divine intervention, or a time you had to pivot. I heard you
Hmm.
say pivot before, so that you wanted to share with us.
That's a good question. Um, I think I think moving to Portland and then moving to Seattle and then moving back to California and then moving to Santa Fe. I think those were kind of pivotal moments for me. Um,
Hmm.
my mom always told me that even when I moved to New York when I was 18, that
Hmm.
if in 6 months it doesn't, it's not working or you don't want to be there, you can always move back home.
That's nice.
And so
Yeah.
I've always kept that in the back of my mind. Like when I moved to
Yeah.
Portland and Seattle, if it doesn't work, then, you can move back.
Right.
So,
That's great to have that support with your mom.
yeah.
That's such it's nice. It's a safety net, but you didn't you knew it was there. You
Yes.
didn't just rely on it, but it gives you that extra able to take chances, and that's what we should do in life. We need to. How are we going to know until we try it?
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Exactly.
That's really great that she's like that. Um see, so it's good you go to the doctor with her now because
Right. I owe her. I owe her my life.
that's it. You owe her for that safety net. See, and
Yes.
the encouragement, because it could so be the other way. Don't do it, don't go, and
Yeah, and my parents were always supportive. I mean, they never
that's
said,
wonderful.
you really shouldn't fly all the way to California.
That's
But of
great.
course, they probably only let me because I did have sister and a brother out
Mm,
here. So, but they've always been supportive of doing something, taking risks. And
mhm.
so I'm grateful for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. That really is. It's so important to do that, really. Um, and I do that with my kids all the time, and I'm like, "Yes, go,
Yeah,
go." And of course,
leave.
yeah,
Get
do
out of
it.
here.
Get out, go out here. Of course, you miss them, but it's different. It's a different relationship. You've got so many things to share when you're back together and you're talking. It's a whole different thing. Um, before we go, do you have any advice that you would give to someone who's thinking of starting out? Anything in terms of you know what what should they, if they're contemplating it, like, what should they do?
With
I wanna say first
for
first step, but that
podcasting
for
or just
podcasting, for
life in general?
podcasting. Well, life too. I would like some life.
Some life advice.
Yeah, life advice, and that actually goes along with, if you're thinking of podcast, you need to it's also life advice because you need to be resilient in that too. But if they're
Yes.
thinking of a podcast, because there is I'm thinking of myself when I thought about it probably for at least a year and a half to 2 years,
Oh, God,
um,
man. Really?
before but not like heavily thought about it.
Right,
You know what I
right.
mean?
Just
Like, I
kind of
knew I
peeked
wanted
up
to. I
once in a
kept
while.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was like, one day I'm gonna do that, but I don't know when. And then when this came up, actually my daughter, one of my daughters, Julia, said to me, um, why don't, because my co-host at the time was like, hey, I want you to do some stuff here or do some, and I'm like, I'm not feeling this. She wanted me to do workshops or something. And I
Mhm.
was like, I don't really want to do that. My daughter's like, hey, what about that podcast you've been talking about? And I had a lot written down, even to the fact of the name. And then I always said to my other daughter, Victoria, who's a
Mhm.
singer-songwriter, that I'm like, you got to write me a song. And it all started to come together at that moment, so then it just starts. But any advice to like get to the start? Like, where do you start? Do you just
Just start. I mean, I know that sounds like
jump?
so simple and cliche, but you don't need all the fancy equipment. You don't need to know everything before you start. There
Mhm.
nowadays technology, you can do it all on your phone. Don't worry about the
True.
audio. Just don't worry about it
Right.
and don't feel like it has to be done a certain way or that there is just one right way. Um and seek somebody out if you don't know any podcasters, but you listen to podcasts and you have a
Mhm.
favorite one that's not a celebrity that will ignore you, you know,
Right.
DM them or send
Right.
them an email or contact them and say, hey, look, I'm thinking about doing this. What would you recommend or what advice would you have?
Right.
But I think, knowing why you're doing it is really important because that will sustain you through
Mhm.
the many weeks and months of recording over and over and over again.
Mhm. That's true. That's good advice. Is there anything I didn't ask you or talk about that you would like to share or tell, or
No, I think you covered it.
did I?
I think so.
I was investigating you for weeks.
I'm wondering if you found anything.
Found lots of good stuff.
Really?
Oh, yes. So
Maybe I
before we
need to
close,
start Googling myself and then I can
you should. No, you have a great
lock it
I
down.
took get that off there. That should not be there. Uh, I would love for you to close us with a quote or a finishing story, whatever you'd like.
So I don't have a quote, but I wanted to share. I don't know if you've ever read Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird,
No.
but it's Bird by Bird, some instructions on writing and life. And she's great. I've seen her speak a couple of times. I think I saw her speak once with Elizabeth Gilbert, which was amazing. But one of her chapters is called Shitty First Drafts.
Oh, I love it.
So I'm going to read just a little excerpt.
Okay. Great.
Here we go. Now, practically even better news than that of short assignments is the idea of shitty first drafts. All good writers write them. This is how they end up with good second drafts and terrific third drafts. People tend to look at successful writers who are getting their books published and maybe even doing well financially, and think that they sit down at their desks every morning feeling like $1 million, feeling great about who they are and how much talent they have and what a great story they have to tell. That they take a few deep breaths, push back their sleeves, roll their necks a few times to get all the cricks out, and dive in, typing fully formed passages as fast as a court reporter. But this is just the fantasy of the uninitiated. I know some very great writers you love who write beautifully and have made a great deal of money, and not one of them sits down routinely, feeling wildly enthusiastic and confident. Not one of them writes elegant first drafts. All right, one of them does, but we do not like her very much. We do not think that she has rich inner life or that God likes her or even can stand her. Although, when I mentioned this to my priest friend Tom, he said, you can safely assume you've created God in your own image when it turns out that God hates all the same people you do.
I love that.
Very few writers really know what they are doing until they've done it, nor do they go about their business feeling dewy and thrilled. They do not type a few stiff warm up sentences and then find themselves bounding along like huskies across the snow. One writer I know tells me that he sits down every morning and says to himself nicely, it's not like you don't have a choice because you do. You can either type or kill yourself. We all often feel like we are pulling teeth, even those writers whose prose ends up being the most natural and fluid. The right words and sentences just do not come pouring out like ticker tape most of the time. Now, Muriel Spark is said to have felt that she was taking dictation from God every morning. Sitting there, one supposes, plugged into a dictaphone, typing away, humming. But this is a very hostile and aggressive position. One might hope for bad things to rain down on a person like this. For me and most of other writers I know, writing is not rapturous. In fact, the only way I can get anything written at all is to write really, really shitty first drafts. And that's
I
the same
love
with
that.
podcasting. The same with podcasting. We don't all sit behind a microphone and, angelic music is playing and a golden ring of light is shining on our head.
Oh my
And
God.
we spew out elegant, profound, life-changing, world-saving content. It doesn't happen, even though it may seem that so-and-so does it that way.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I love that. That is just that is because that's what we think. As much as my brain will say, that is not real. Of course they don't. Sometimes that's what you believe. Like you're like, why can't I do this? Why does this look like such a mess? So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That is perfect. Oh my gosh, that is really great. Oh my gosh, this was such a wonderful time spent with you. Oh my
Thanks,
goodness.
Anne. I loved it.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. And tell me where we can find you and all the kind of places. And I'll also put it in the show notes, but tell everybody where to find you.
We can go to our website at womenwhopodcastmag.com. You can go to our Instagram at Women Who Podcast Magazine. You can email me, which I think is on the website, and you can send me a message on Instagram. I'm always available in some way, and I'm in LinkedIn as well. So,
and she is very responsive. I will tell you that is true. That is very true.
Yeah, I can't have anything in my inbox that hasn't been read. It's like that OCD.
Oh my God, I love it. I love it. I also want to give a huge shout out to Victoria Lynn Purdy, singer-songwriter, my daughter, for the theme song for Time to Elevate. And listen to her interview, follow her on Spotify and all that good stuff. And if anyone is listening and wants to be a guest on Time to Elevate, feel free to email me, timetoelevate@timetoelevate.org, or we're on Instagram. But I swear, Kathy, this is like so rejuvenating for me. I'm like, I'm 3 hours ahead of you. So I'm in, and I'm wide awake.
Well, I really appreciate you inviting me on, and this was a great conversation. I loved it. And, keep doing what you're doing because you are making a difference. And there are people listening, whether you aren't aware of that.
Thank you. I know. I'm like, are you out there?
Hello. There's like an echo, right? Thanks, Anne.
Life
Bye.
gets tough, and I know it's hard to cope with the unknown. For all of us, I know it'd be easy if we were perfect, but we're not. So we go to find our fate, to find our hope. It all begins with looking up. It all begins with you. It's time to